Welcome to the Pelvic Health Products Podcast. I am your host, Fiona Rogers, and this is a podcast about products for your pelvic health. I am a physiotherapist with 40 years of experience as a health professional, combined with many years' experience in sourcing, selling, and teaching about the effective use of products for your pelvic health journey. Join me as I chat with health professionals, academics, and entrepreneurs who have created products and resources to help you with your pelvic health journey. There is a confusing array and choice of products on the market. We will get to the inside story of how and why many of these were created and how they work. I'm excited to say that many of my guests are women creating products for women. Please remember that this is for general information only and should not be considered as individual medical advice. Welcome to today's episode. Welcome to this episode of the Pelvic Health Product Podcast, and my name is Fiona Rogers. I'm your host, and I'm delighted to say that with me today is the one and only Sue Croft, who is a women's health physiotherapist from Brisbane, and I feel very lucky to not only call her a colleague but also a very dear friend. Sue is one of the very few physios in Australia to have been awarded an OAM for her services to the profession, and she actually fits all the categories of what I'm trying to aim for with this podcast. So not only has she got some products, which are the books that she has written, she's also full of resources because her blog, we'll get to talking about that, Sue, but she's written numerous blogs which have helped so many people. And also she's a woman very passionate about helping other women. So welcome, Sue. Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself to start with.
Hi, Fiona, and thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of your wonderful new podcast. And already I've learned something from the first one with Claire on our beautiful Olive and Bee product. And so, it is really helpful to people to talk about products and understand a bit more. So thank you very much for taking the effort to set it up. So look, I've been a physiotherapist this is my 50th year since I actually enrolled in physiotherapy. So in 1974, when the floods were on in Brisbane, I went off to uni and started and then graduated. So it's 47 and a half years that I've been a physio, which is a long time, but it doesn't feel like, I ever get tired of actually doing, especially now I'm doing pelvic health physiotherapy. It's a wonderful profession and it's nice when you're helping women and you're helping other people who are suffering pelvic health conditions. But even though I'm old, I'm still love getting up each morning and treating the patients, which is nice.
That's wonderful to still have that passion.
The other thing is that interestingly, one of my daughters is into public relations, and in 2011 she got me into actually Twitter, which we might all be vanishing off one day soon.
It's now called X.
It's changed its tone a bit, but and then I got interested in social media. So what I found from social media is the opportunity to disperse information widely around the world, and I think that when I was working as a sole physio and helping woman by woman, I think that the value of the social media, all the different, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok, and then writing the blogs and writing the books, all of that means that I hope that I'm getting the information out a little bit wider and a lot more women who may not have the opportunity to get access to quality pelvic health physiotherapy. There's a lot of people in regional Australia who just have no access. It's such a big country, and in other countries around the world where pelvic health physiotherapy isn't quite so developed as it is in Australia. We are so blessed here, to have the level of interest in pelvic health physiotherapy and the education that we have. So that's the other part of the later part of my life, is just becoming engaged with opportunities to spread the word.
And I think the great thing about your blogs in particular is that they not only help women out there, they help the health professionals as well. I've always learning things from your blog. So you're a lady with many talents and a very broad knowledge that's very much appreciated by our pelvic health community. So
Thank
that
you.
sort of leads me into say, what did lead you to, like, why did you write your first book? What was that spark that set it off?
So, seeing we're here to talk about books, I have written 3 books, okay? And the first book, which was Pelvic Floor Recovery, Edition 1. Now, I'm hereby giving everybody license, Fiona, who has Pelvic Floor Recovery, Physiotherapy for Gynecological Repair Surgery, Edition 1, to have a ceremonial burning of that book, because it is, when you're up to edition 5 and there's been a lot of evidence and you have understood about the style of your writing and then the impact of words on patients, you know, the content is basically the same, but it's the way I directed it and the didactic way. So what led me to doing it was that, and I'd wanted to do it for 10 years, to be honest, because there was such a gap in the knowledge when you're trying to teach each woman as she goes off for surgery what to do, what to think about, how little things like how to roll out of bed, how to actually look after your catheter, all those things that are just so run of the mill to physiotherapists working in hospitals, to urogynecologists who perform it, but to a woman, it's all just alien stuff and they get so terrified. So I had reams and reams of handouts and I would give them all out to the patient, and I kept thinking, oh, if only I had time and the ability to write a book about this and stop giving lots of bits of paper and just pop it in one book. So in 2011, and it was when we had another flood event in Brisbane, and I started to get a bit of unusual pain, and it was gynae pain. And so I had a scan and it showed some abnormal measurements, which, you know, women know all about postmenopause. And I was sent off to have a consult about that and have some surgery. And so that weekend, after I was said, oh, you have to go and have a little procedure to check on what's going on there, I thought, I'm going to write this book, because if this is, you know, not good outcome, I'm not going to actually not do this thing that I've wanted to do for so long. And I literally sat down that weekend and I transferred all my handouts into, Bob set up a little publisher document, and I transferred them all in, and I started writing, you know, deciding what chapters I wanted. And literally that's how it happened. And every weekend for 8 weekends, I just wrote that book. And the good news is that, of course, that little procedure I had clarified that it wasn't anything serious, and I was fixed up from having that procedure, and that was a happy story. But the best part about it was it really spurred me into getting up and writing the book, and it started there. So it was a very fast process waiting to happen, and I just needed the impetus to do it.
That's fabulous. It would make it sound easy, but I know how much work goes into writing something like that, because you have to reference it as well, don't you?
Yes. Well, you know, when I first wrote it, it was definitely, I think the book has progressed as I've gone along, and I've tried to keep it very evidence-based. So I've updated it very regularly. And that's why we're up to edition 5 of that very first book. And a couple of editions ago, I decided to extend it to colorectal surgery. But, you know, it isn't easy, and probably it could be easier if I was a bit more methodical about my references, you know. That's always the worst bit. You write it all and then you have to go back and do all this. So there's probably a better way to do it, Fiona. But I just muddle along, and in the end, you know, I do keep trying to look and make sure that evidence isn't changing and it is updated. And so it has been a lot of work, but it's been a labour of love. And I just love the fact that, you know, all over the world, like we get some remarkable countries, women from countries asking for the book and sending it off to them. And that sort of does make me feel really happy that, you know, I am maybe making a tiny difference to their bladder, bowel and pelvic health.
And then that led to a second book, I believe.
It did. Yeah, so when I first started, and it was called, of course it had the surgery book in it, but there was lots of surgery name in the title. There was lots of information, the bladder, bowel, pelvic floor, pelvic pain, lots of information that was relevant to women who had some degree of pelvic floor dysfunction, bladder bowel issues, that they weren't ever going to go on and have surgery. So I really quickly wanted to do something that was for those girls that, they were having some endo pain, or they were anti or postnatal, or they were perimenopausal and never going to need surgery. So even though I could have said, look, just don't ignore that surgery bit, I thought, no, I've got to write one that's more relevant to that cohort. And also I then added in one of the next editions of Pelvic Floor Essentials, I added in a chapter on how to toilet train a child, because there are obviously lots of grandmas and mothers who are there. And so getting that important information about how to go about doing that, I thought, well, that's getting to sometimes the root of the problems comes from when you actually got a mum who's unfortunately got a lot of frequency due to her pelvic floor dysfunction, teaching Johnny, to go to the toilet every time they see a toilet. So it's just that thing of let's get the good bladder habits and the good bowel habits going from a very young age and early in the child, so that if the mum does have issues, or the grandma has issues and she's got a belief about something that might have been handed down through the generations, that she's not giving terrible information to the kids. So and that's a well-received chapter. Like lots of my patients, and love the fact that when they get to the bit after they've had the baby 2 years or 3 years down the track, they can look at, well, what is the right thing to do? And then I expanded the pain chapter, and the latest edition of the 4th edition of Essentials and the 5th edition of Recovery, I've really expanded sex, because sexual dysfunction is a massive issue, and it's very difficult for women to sometimes broach it. And in Essentials, I actually threw out the travel chapter and expanded sexual dysfunction. But in the next one, people were annoyed about that, and I put travel back in and just made the book bigger. So much to perhaps Bob's horror of having to, all those pages do weigh, and they just push it over the weight of what, when you're sending them all out. So, but no, it's just developed what I do is, when I've finished the last book, I always just have a new book there. And when things crop up, and I mean, I have to mention the beautiful Taryn Hallam, who does our education here in Australia and now worldwide. And that's why the word is just on how to do evidence-based pelvic health physiotherapy is just really so worldwide now, is thanks to Taryn's work. But she's a bit annoying, because what I often do is do a course. I'm just about to send a book out to print, and then there's something invaluable or something that's contradictory, and you just think, okay, I've got to change with the evidence. So I have to do a rewrite of those sections. So, that's what I try and do, is really keep it relevant and up to date.
Yeah. That's very much appreciated, I think. I always found in clinic too, I'd be saying all of those things to my ladies who were going in for surgery, and then that they can only take so much in at the time. So it was always wonderful to be able to say, well, here's a book that reinforces all of this, and they could take that away and, read it in hospital or when they got home, whatever the relevant chapter might be to their point of recovery.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that it's been a slow burn for a long time. It's now 2024. I started in 2011. So it's 13 years now. And it has been a slow burn. And what I do get now is a lot more urogynes and gynes who actually buy the books or direct people to the books, because what it does is it answers a lot of questions for the doctors. The women have got multiple questions, and it just saves them having to answer really what is to them a very basic, simple thing. But to a woman who is, when we're looking at the statistics for repair surgery, if you do not have a levator avulsion, which is that muscle injury following childbirth, you've got up to a 30% chance that the surgery is going to fail anyway. If you have levator avulsion injury, you have up to 80% chance. So, they're already terrified that if they make the decision to have the surgery, it's going to fail. And that's the really big reason I wrote it, is if we as physiotherapists can teach women about how to defecate properly so they're not straining and they're reducing pressures down post-operatively, and we can teach them the knack of bracing to engage pelvic floor to help protect their surgery, But then, as you say, people only take on, maybe on a good day, 20% of what you're saying to them in a consult.
Yeah.
So if they get, and I'm experiencing that now. Like we've had quite a health year with both myself, with as you know, a broken leg, with Bob, with a heart issue. And I wanted to write a book about the cardiac issues because there was such I don't know, there's lots on the internet, but I just wanted a little handbook so I could actually flip to that bit. And but I won't do that because you have to have a bit more knowledge. And it's definitely, I feel like the day of a book has not died yet. And whilst we have a multiple access to information, I love the fact that I still am producing a book that women can take into hospital in their hospital bag, and they can look at it and they can read it and they can refer to it when the problem happens, and it's just beside their bedside table. So I'm not ashamed to say in the digital age and the internet age that I love the fact that I've produced a book that they can access.
Yeah, an actual physical book to take with them.
An actual physical book,
yeah, absolutely.
Just a little bit on it, which is not so relevant necessarily, but you're an international company, and there are lots of people who know all about you, Fiona, and your wonderful online store. I had a beautiful women's health physio, Alexandra Schaefer, who worked with me, and she's German. And she sadly and happily for her family, sadly for me, went back to Germany a few years ago. And when she got back there, she really missed having the opportunity to give her patients the book. And so we collaborated, and I did a translation of the book, the surgery book, and then she made sure that it was using really proper German grammar, because it's very particular language and you want to make it sound. And so I have the surgery book translated into German. And what I've realised from that exercise, it's quite hard when you don't speak the language to actually then promote the book afterwards. So, when women read the book who are native German speakers, they do love it and they have lots of positive things. But it's been a hectic time and I've had no capacity to promote the book. But one day there might be, and that's when I hope, because Germany is one of those countries that doesn't really have the input of a lot of pelvic health physios. And Alex herself has done an amazing job in changing that a bit. She's gone over there and she's set up a clinic and based it on really the way we run our clinic, and with Taryn's lovely information. And she's now teaching courses over there, and I think she's doing an amazing job.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And there's quite a bit of upsurge in interest, but it's definitely a different environment to what we have here, where it's quite common for people to understand pelvic health physiotherapists. You just pop along and see them if you've got a problem. You don't need, their first contact practitioners, as opposed to what happens in Germany. Much different, yeah.
Well, you've just answered my next question, because I was going to ask you about the translation.
Yes.
Well, we sort of covered this, but I just sort of wanted to backtrack and say, what is the process to create a book? Do you have a process that you follow?
Yeah, look, literally right back on that first day when I set it up, I sort of thought about what I wanted to talk about. And so obviously I've started with what are the pelvic floor muscles, and then I've gone into bladder function, and I've gone into bowel function, and then moved through all those chapters. So I really just set up what did I want to talk about. And then I started writing. And look, Fiona, I love writing. And despite back at I won't name the girls' school I went to, I loved writing. And when I was a little girl, like literally at primary school, I was put into some class to write essays in a competition. And so I got to this big, private, well-known girls' school, and I struck an English teacher who didn't like my style of writing, or perhaps she didn't like me. I don't know. I might have been a bit of a giggler or something, but causing trouble, who knows. But anyway, I was never getting above a C for English. So there was a definite feeling of stifling going on there. But, when Katie taught me about social media, and then my son, like both my kids have influenced it, two of my three children have influenced it. And it's not that Sophie hasn't influenced it either. They've all been so supportive, just in case she watches this.
She's listening. Hi, Sophie.
My son had to do a blog for his architecture course. So I didn't know what a blog was when he started having to do it. And so I sat with him and we looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, I think I like this blog thing. I think I got an opportunity to do some writing about pelvic floor dysfunction. So that's how my blog started, literally. So Katie got me onto social media. Michael got me onto writing a blog because I just stole the idea from him. I'm going to do this for myself. And that's where it started. So I think because I like writing in a conversational way, and I might as well bring my whole family in here, it does drive my mother nuts because she is very particular about grammar and how she learnt grammar back in her day. So my conversational way and starting sentences with and, but, and so definitely does her head in. So, but I like it because I think patients can listen to it and it is conversational and it is totally, everything I do really is totally directed at the community, at patients. Because when I'm writing about something that may interest physiotherapists, I still want to make it in that style. But, it might be obviously the content is much more about, well, look, this is the problem I see, and this is how we've got to correct it as a profession. And, if we think about our words, and, I talk a lot about this, and our words are very important. So I've sometimes written a blog that is totally directed at physiotherapists and doctors. But the patients might say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense to me. I didn't like the way that something was so didactically sent to me by my physio, or I felt very negative when the doctor said that about my lifting weights. So that they might take on board that, they don't have to see that as such a thing. They use your common sense, read a bit more about it. Is that really accurate, or is that just scaremongering? So, I'm a big believer in not writing it in a stilted way, not in perfect grammar. It's really, I do bring my family and my life into it because that just makes it seem more, and that's just the way I write. So, it isn't what a lot of people may like. And even the books are a little bit more like that, they're a little bit more, I try to keep it simpler like that so that there's more chance that people are going to enjoy reading it, because it's quite a lot of words in there when you think about it.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes both the books and your blog so relatable, is that it's like sitting down and having a chat with you, which is, what we're doing here now. But, people can relate to that, and then they trust you. So they trust the information that you're giving them. And it's not sort of going above anybody's head. It's just giving really good information in a very simple, easy to read manner. So, so how many blogs are you up to now?
Oh, there's about 460 blogs, and there's about 150 in draft form because I have this great habit that I'm in clinic and I think, oh, God, I need to write about that. And I quickly just start one and I put a few thoughts down and then that's it. And, so there are a lot in there. So I do have a lot of ideas about blog. When I used to do dance, and I'd be in the dance studio, and I actually saw something about it the other day, that dancing is something which it does generate a lot of thoughts, because I would always be in that dance studio and I'd be looking and thinking about something, and then I'd immediately want to go and write it down on a piece of paper. So I'd always have a little biro down my bra here, sports bra, and I'd be writing on my hand through dance, because it does, dance is so good for so many reasons. But I definitely just get lots of ideas, and then it's just then going back and actually developing it into a full blog. So there is a lot of blogs waiting there to get a bit of time to do.
There's your retirement project.
Yeah. No, not quite retirement yet. We mustn't mention the R word, Fiona. I've still got a couple more years of doing half time.
A few more years left.
Yeah.
Well, that probably does bring me to what is next for Sue Croft.
Yeah. Look, I think
her books.
Yeah, I think that obviously I'm just going to keep updating them. I have got quite a few ideas for different sorts of books, like just making a smaller version on particular topics.
Yep.
And I think one of the things you mentioned to me in our little email was, about, what sets my books aside from the competitors? Well, I don't see anybody who writes a book for women as a competitor. I think women need to read as much as they can, and every different view, as long as it's, based on fact. I think it just enhances their information. It just fills in a gap. They might just pick up 2 new things from a different book. So I feel that the way I've written it, I wanted to, like when I'm talking about levator avulsion, and that little bit of artwork in the back there behind me, you can just see here. That's a little beautiful Indigenous artist who's just straight out of college, and she is so brilliant. And some of her artwork is just amazing. And she did that for me so I could incorporate that on the cover of Recovery. So that's the new cover. And I did that because lots of people keep thinking that they've actually got my book. So the old cover of, that's the German one, but that is the old cover of the surgical book. And so I did want to change to try and say, look, this is up to edition 5, but levator avulsion is a complex topic, and it gets chucked out in a 1-hour consultation, and it sounds so scary. And I just wanted to write factual information so that as people get to see more physios who are actually doing really good assessments and actually giving good feedback, but maybe just haven't got the time to go into the detail of what that means. And so I can get the words in there and say, but if you've got a complete bilateral avulsion, that's not the end of it. We've got to actually give them hope, because it is such a devastating diagnosis that without filling in the gaps, and, if anything has really changed from 2011 to 2024, it's the last 5 years I've really approached and worked on the biopsychosocial understanding of, the biology is what's gone on with the muscles, what's going on with the nerves, what's going on with the bladder. The psychosocial is, what are the implications of what's going on? What's the diagnosis mean for this woman? How is it changing her life? And I think giving really good support there, so that if you've got prolapse, you don't worry so much about stages. You don't worry about what the diagnosis is. Let's worry about your function and give you really good support mechanisms to understand that we can get back to weightlifting, we can get back to running, we can get back to doing all those things you love doing. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to pace ourselves? How are we going to give you support with something like a pessary? So that if they've got something that's got a lot of words that they can come back to and think, okay, it's not the end of the world. That's what I've really tried to do and develop. So I never look at other books and think, I'm going to bring that into my book. My book is chock-a-block. I can't fit any more in. All I'm going to do is update the evidence. But I encourage everybody, read as much as you can about pelvic floor dysfunction in all those different, because all the people who've written those books are very clever clinicians as well. And so you will learn something from them.
Yeah. But you led the way with that. There's been a lot of excellent books written since, for sure. But and I think too, getting a diagnosis, often that's the only words that someone will take away from that consultation. So to then have something that they can go back and read over that's written, so at the level that they need to understand it, no highfalutin sort of wording and confusing, really.
Yes.
And, and as you mentioned before, having been through a few medical issues this year, when you're the patient, it really gives you that sense of, and it's something that you haven't come across before, how you can feel a little bit lost amongst all of that. So to have something to hang on to that you can take home and read over is, it's such a valuable tool for people. And I'm sure that you've helped so many, many women around the world. And for that, we're all very grateful to you.
Thank you. That's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And, having been a friend of yours for such a long time, and we all know when we go to a conference with Sue that there's always going to be a pile of books in her magic bag.
I never lose an opportunity.
No, I think that's wonderful. So, Sue, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about your books and your blogs. And anybody who's listening or watching, I'll have links to where you can find these resources because I can highly recommend anything that Sue does. So to give you that information for your pelvic health journey. So thank you very much, Sue, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Fiona. Lovely talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and also sharing with your friends. And remember, pelvic health matters. See you next time.